The Detroit Square is the new project coming to Midtown Detroit. It includes the 11 cultural institutions in the city, which are the DIA, the Michigan Science Center, the Charles H. Wright Museum, the Detroit Public Library, the International Institute, the Detroit Historical Museum, the Scarab Club, the Hellenic Museum, the College for Creative Studies, Wayne State, and the U of M Rackham Building. The aim of the project is to connect all these institutions together in one space because they have been historically disjointed. Oftentimes when public spaces are built in cities, community engagement is barely present. Therefore, I set out to see what the Detroit residents think about community engagement and what the designers on this project will specifically implement to allow residents to have their voices heard.
Just make it known to Detroit residents what they're trying to implement, what steps they're trying to take, and just to get some input on, how residents feel about it. It's going to happen, be it we like it or not. It's going to happen, but just to get an insight from Detroit residents, I think it would help the project run.
I definitely think that engaging with the people who live in that area, the people who, I think, especially for, the Midtown area, a lot of people come from different parts of the city to visit the different sites and things. So engaging with even people who live in Detroit, but outside of, downtown or Midtown, I think it's important to really talk to them and get their perspectives because, there can be sometimes detrimental or negative effects of construction or moving things around and things like that. You would hope that they're being done for the benefit of the community. So to me, it doesn't really make sense to say we're going to do this because this is good for the community and then not consult the community on at every step of the process.
I think people want to use public space differently and want to experience museums differently. And so, this project will really give us the opportunity to provide much more varied experiences for a wider range of people. And of course, that's always the focus, is how can we make this space more welcoming, more friendly, more user-friendly, more usable by the institutions themselves who are sitting on all this land,
I think that urban planning and thinking about the way that the space is going to be utilized is extremely important. You don't want to put something that's not going to be utilized to its full function. So I think that as we continue to work on the development of the city, it is really important and crucial to think about how is the city going to, the people that live in the city and the surrounding area is going to actually engage with the space.
I don't know if focus groups are the best thing.
We did focus group. I'm not sure if we did focus groups. But
we knew that eventually we would have a community engagement portion for this event. But first and foremost, if we did not have the buy-in from our cultural institutions or our public entities, there would be no point in even reaching out to residents. You have to have the buy-in from the most immediately impacted stakeholders first, which are our cultural center institutions, because most of the design that we're looking at doing falls on private property anyways.
Usually when ideas are put forth to the residents, it's almost like an afterthought. You already started the committee. You started, trying to build the project up, so to speak. And I think it's like a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, well, let's implement them now. But you've already signed the paperwork. In the future, try to avoid that knee-jerk reaction when you can just put the poll out there and see what it is that the residents of Detroit would actually be involved in or their ideals.
Now Detroit is different. Downtown Detroit is totally different. And I haven't been downtown now because I don't like what it has become. To me, it's become more for tourist attraction. It's become more business savvy. I think that with the square coming, it is going to be a tourist attraction. And so I don't think most of the residents of Detroit maybe go see it one time, but it's not going to be something that it's going to be more so for, I believe, for tourists.
So for us, when we think about the cultural center, yes, it needs to be a place for Detroit residents, but it also needs to be a larger destination because it is the cultural center for the metro area. It is an international destination.
Most of the people that live in downtown and midtown are like, students who are either like commuting, from the suburbs, or like they're young professionals like me. And I just feel like we're not a representative like population. We're not a representative group of the entire population of Detroit. And yeah, it just seems a little like, it doesn't feel completely right for like all of these like revitalization efforts to be concentrated to benefit like young professionals. I think the first thing is to be really intentional about having conversations with people that live, with Detroit residents that live outside of downtown and midtown, and like that there's a big diversity in the demographics of people that they talk to geographically, but also like age wise. I'd say race wise, but also like I think Black voices should be like amplified because Detroit is a majority Black city. So I think that's the first thing, is just being really intentional about that, like who you're talking to in order to get feedback. And then also being really frank about like the potential drawbacks of a project like this, like especially in terms of, construction or things that people may want to know about before they say like yes, because it's a great idea on its surface, like it sounds fantastic, but I think like, especially people who are living in the area or visiting the area need to know like how long the project will take, and like what limitations there might be during the like construction phase that may impact things.
I think that's what's happening is it's not intended to help Detroit residents. Again, it's more for non-residents. And instead, what I feel they should do, is try to help the residents here instead of chasing them away.
So prior to this competition, we had been working for a decade with residents, artists, friends, colleagues, all sorts of people that had a very astute and complex and nuanced understanding of the city and of place. So in many ways, if we talk about engagement, it was the duration of our professional life in Detroit that led us to understand that a finalized formal outcome would not be the proper solution. And that in fact, instead of saying that we've engaged people in the beginning, the entire design process was about engagement in order to come up with this guiding plan. Of course, we don't know if the district touches every single resident of the city. All we know is how each institution as a mediator for cultural production and for space making speaks to, attracts, and programs their institutions to attract those audiences. And the aspiration of the project is for these institutions to begin to share audiences so that there's less algorithmic social bubble distanciation between us and more mixity. It's important to recognize that this project kicked off a couple of months before the pandemic. And in our practice, typically what we do is we keep an open door policy at our office. When we took that online pivot, which, as we all know, has been extremely challenging, we had to rethink those strategies that were about embodied, serendipitous, empathetic communication. And so it took us a while to figure out both how to bridge the technological gaps that inevitably come with economic difference in communities, and build a platform that could be interactive and that could seek people's feedback as a stopgap measure for the duration of the pandemic. So that platform is called ccpi.online. And what's very unusual about it is that it offers a glimpse into design in progress. It's a rare case for designers and architects and urbanists to share work as it becomes available and research as it becomes available. But that platform does precisely that in order to be as transparent as possible given the number of stakeholders involved in this process. So that has been our interim solution. And as we move slowly into the next phase of a health inflected future, we're going to reconfigure again and hybridize more programming so that we get input.
We've done a lot of community engagement throughout the entire design competition. While we were in the competition mode, we held a number of community engagement sessions with residents, not just for the city of Detroit, but for the metro area as well. And I mean, I personally went out to probably over 50 different events over a year and a half with a table, trying to get feedback on getting people's their feedback on the cultural center, how it operated at that time. We did an exhibition showcasing the 3 finalist teams that we held at the DIA that was up for a few months. But more than anything, we just wanted to hear what would bring you to the cultural center. What do you want to do there? What types of programming would you like to see? And everything that we're doing moving forward, we're definitely sharing with interested resident groups so that they can learn from our research of what we're trying to do for the district. So even though the targeted group is much larger for the cultural center, there are specific ways though that we are trying to target Detroit residents and other organizations to make sure that they're part of this larger process here. We've put together a pretty robust community engagement process that we're just starting to implement. We've done a number of meetings targeting residents thus far, and to try and make sure that their voices are heard in this design process. I agree with them that they all need, I mean, if for those who want to be part of the process should be part of it. At the same time, though, we've got to develop something that works well for our cultural center institutions and try to find that balance, because again, what we're doing is mostly on private property. I would also say, and I think a lot of people don't believe us when we say it's still very early in the process. And so we are really trying to reach out and do as many meetings as possible. It's just a different time period. And so I would ask them for a little bit of patience.
We've known from the very beginning that we can't be successful without community engagement, and from the very beginning that's been a part of this process and it's baked in. So we engaged. The public was invited to the design competition. They were, people asked questions. They were, very. So, it was very much a public process. There were workshops. Actually, even before the design competition, we decided on the final. Well, no, when we kind of got down to the final 3 design teams, there was a community engagement part of the competition that they had to lead. We wanted to see how the design teams, planned and engaged with the community. So we had a community engagement process as part of the competition, which was really phenomenal, and was really wonderful to see these designers, kind of interfacing and the kinds of ways that they would do community engagement. And this is still a big part of the current team's portfolio of work.
It's like no matter what you do, you're never going to make everyone happy. And so as long as we can document, this is what we did to make sure that we promoted that people could be involved in this. That's all we can really do right now, especially considering the weird circumstances we find ourselves in. But at the same time, though, we know we have to do more community engagement. But, the pandemic has really slowed down this whole entire process. But at the same time, though, it has proven that people want more safe outdoor public spaces. So there is a need for this project and what it can do for our residents here. I do agree that we have to do more work to make sure that everyone feels invested in this. Because if people feel like this is just something that was developed for just suburbanites or for international tourists or whatever, then that doesn't do anyone any good. I mean, it's got to be built for everyone in mind.
As this project is still in the pre-construction phase, we will be able to follow along with this engagement process to see if the designers will actually implement the different ways that they said they would do to involve the residents. The square is not a simple project, but when designing Detroit, it should always start with the community.